It's a speculative, volatile store of value. Is it being used as a payment anywhere? Are we buying cups of coffee with it? Not really. The only payment mechanism it's being used for in a primary sense is illicit activity.
비트코인은 투기적이고 변동성이 큰 가치 저장 수단이며 비트코인의 유일한 실질적인 사용처는 불법 활동이라고 주장하고 있는 인물은 현 미국 증권거래위원회 SEC의 위원장 게리 겐슬러입니다. 비트코인 현물 ETF 정식 승인 이후 이제는 이더리움 현물 ETF 승인까지 기다리고 있는 현재 이 시점에서 가상자산의 제도권, 채택에 있어 가장 중요한 정부 기관이자 최종 의사결정자인 SEC 위원장 게리 겐슬러가 생각하는 향후 비트코인의 미래와 크립토 시장의 전망에 대한 그의 디테일한 인사이트에 대해서 함께 들어보도록 하겠습니다.
Joining us right now, first on CNBC, following that decision that some have described as historic, is SEC Chair Gary Gensler. Chair Gensler, we appreciate you being with us. Let me start by asking you this. Do you consider the decision historic? And it appears that it's a decision that you made either reluctantly or perhaps even begrudgingly.
Well, look, Andrew, this has been considered for a long time. As you know, starting under Chair Clayton, we had disapproved a number of these over the years, and something had changed. I'm a deep believer in the rule of law and a respect for the courts, and taking a new court decision into consideration, we move forward. I think this is the most sustainable path forward.
So it appears, though, from what you're saying and reading through the decision as well, that what changed is not necessarily something inherent to crypto or Bitcoin per se, but what changed was what the courts did. Is that the way to think about this?
Well, we do everything here at the Securities and Exchange Commission within the law and within how the courts interpret those laws. And that's what the American people expect, and that's what we do here.
What is your message to investors about Bitcoin now? Because we're going to have all sorts of public investors now potentially have access to Bitcoin in a way that they didn't before. We were just talking to Larry Fink. He said that he got a huge wave of new investors getting into Bitcoin through this ETF. You have still suggested to be cautious about it. And I'm trying to understand how you think about those cross currents in terms of the message you're telling investors.
Bitcoin itself, we did not approve. We do not endorse. This is a product called an exchange-traded product, a way that investors can invest in that underlying non-security commodity called Bitcoin. But yes, investors, I think, should be aware that the underlying asset is a highly speculative, volatile asset. And amongst its use cases is really for illicit activity, money laundering and sanctions and ransomware and the like. And I know that you've asked other people over the last few days, is it being used as a store of value? It's a speculative, volatile store of value. Is it being used as a payment anywhere? Are we buying cups of coffee with it? Not really. The only payment mechanism it's being used for in a primary sense is illicit activity. So I think you've been spot on about that, Andrew.
The proof of work, akin to gold, every monetary aspect we've had for thousands of years is represented perfectly. And Tom Lee, there's never been a mistake on the blockchain out of trillions of transactions. You understand it. You taught at MIT. Which is it? Is it a beanie baby in your view, or is it something that has inherent value that's going to be part of the financial system decades from now? Which is it?
Look, no doubt there are innovations within this field, and those innovations, which I taught about at MIT, around a ledger system. It's just an accounting system called the blockchain technology. But there's an irony. In the midst of this, Satoshi Nakamoto said this was going to be a decentralized system. And finance, this has led to centralization. Think about the irony of those who say this week is historic. This was about centralization and traditional means of finance that investors who could already express themselves in Bitcoin, you could already, before this week, buy it through major brokerage houses, but now you can buy it through this thing called an exchange-traded product
but the
as
underlying
well,
asset still has
centralized.
The underlying asset still has the decentralized, distributed ledger, all those characters. That sounds like a, I don't know. That sounds like
no, Andrew. With all respect, there's a lot of centralization here, and even the underlying ledger is largely the Bitcoin's produced by a handful of mining companies and the like. And so I'm just saying now, in terms of monetary history. We have a dollar, we have a yen, we have a euro, we have the renminbi, and there's a reason for it because we do have a common economy that relies on those currencies.
Chair Gensler, let me ask you this, though. Is there a possibility, despite the fact that this has been now approved, that this spot ETF has been approved, that you could see a day where Bitcoin itself in some way would be outlawed? I ask because if you recall, and now there's a lawsuit taking place between Coinbase and the SEC. They went public, and they've now made. You've come back and said that there are certain unregistered securities and the like that are on their platform. They say, well, if you approved us the first time, how can you come back and say that this is not kosher? And so I think there is this other question about, and I know you're not endorsing Bitcoin, does that still open up the possibility that Bitcoin could somehow come under fire from the SEC or some other agency?
Look, let me talk about this field more broadly, and the American public is aware of this. It's rife with conflicts. It's rife with fraud and abuse without prejudging any one token. Many of these tokens, I would suggest a majority of these tokens are actually securities under the securities law. And so the platforms, the various places that you might buy or sell these crypto security tokens need to come into compliance with the federal laws.
What did you make of what Elizabeth Warren, who was very supportive of you taking this role originally, coming out and saying the SEC is wrong on the law and wrong on the policy?
I have deep respect for those who may have been on the other side of this. But again, I have a deep respect for the law and how courts interpret the law. We had the D.C. Circuit, a three-judge panel rule on this. We looked at it, and I thought this was the most sustainable path forward.
How do you think about other cryptocurrencies? People are now talking about whether there should be an Ethereum ETF and the like. Is that something you think you would take on proactively? Is that something that ultimately, in the same way that Grayscale had to go to court, does the court decision around Bitcoin to you act as a precedent on other currencies?
I look at what we did this week as it's cabined to one non-security commodity called Bitcoin. Like we've had gold spot exchange-traded products and silver exchange-traded products in the past and approved in the past, this is cabined just to that one non-security commodity token.